I say that because you've got to say that these days, wherever you are, and anybody else that... we've got several other ladies of the church wanted to know if they could come on Saturday morning, so I pointed out to them they could declare themselves male on Saturday morning if they chose to. So we'll see what happens Saturday morning, really. See who dares, who dares. The bad news is I'm here because I'm second choice. There was an original person, wasn't there, we were trying to get. Maybe you don't remember that either. And they said to me, Brian and Thingy said to me, if he can't come, then you'll be doing it. So I said, well, I'll do it, but I'm not going to talk about sport because you get pigeonholed, don't you? So I said I'll do it on my vet days. And that, how it came up to the title, All Creatures Great and Small, which actually is a title I'm going to kind of stick to. I'm also trying out some new technology. I'm going to operate this thing, I'm told, from my phone, which is very clever, isn't it? Very clever. But now I've got the power to interfere with the PowerPoint on a Sunday morning. Which is great. So anybody got any ideas, just let me know. Okay, guys. Most of you probably know that I was a vet. But why was I a vet? Was it some great revelation or whatever? It's weird because it was something I wanted to do ever since I was 12, I think. The idea first came into my mind. No connection with any vets or farmers or, I never even, well, I had a hamster. That was as near as I got. A hamster that used to, my dad had great delight in feeding it Cadbury's chocolate fingers, and it would stuff them in its pouch. The finger would be longer than the hamster, and it would walk around with this great thing sticking out. Anyway, but there was no particular reason, except I got it in my mind. And I got into college, into veterinary college, into the Royal Dick School of Veterinary Studies, named after William Dick, who founded the school, in opposition to the school in Edinburgh, in London, what became the Royal College. In fact, there was a time when because to practice veterinary medicine, you've got to be a member of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, the RCVS. They have their own exams. Was the London College. And then they started to recognize exams in veterinary medicine that other universities created. So in Edinburgh, it was the Bachelor of Veterinary Medicine and Science. Interesting thing, I raised this with my daughter this last week because we were talking about the male patriarchy, which she keeps going on about. I don't know what it is, but she keeps going on about it. And I said, nobody's questioned yet in feminism, have they? Not that I've seen, why we have bachelor and master's degrees. We should have mistress degrees and spinsters, That would be good, wouldn't it? I'm thinking of starting a blog around all that, but that's another matter. Anyway, and then the university set up these degrees, and the Royal College recognize the degree and say that's equivalent to our exams. So if you pass that exam, we'll let you into the Royal College. And there was a time in Edinburgh back in the 19th century when the examiners came up from London to test the guys at the college in Edinburgh, and they failed them all, and there was a big political thing going on. So the students had a riot and ran these guys out of town, threatening them. It was quite exciting, really. So we've got a checkered history. And we also have 2 graduation ceremonies. I don't know if this happens for medics as well. We have one when you get your degree from the university. Then in the afternoon, there was one where you graduated into the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. So I got into college. They required 2 A-level passes. That's all I got. Different days. It was because I was so brilliant. That was the reason. It wasn't actually. The then dean of the school decided that it was a pointless waste of time interviewing people. You couldn't tell much from an interview, half an hour or whatever it was. So he just did it on school reports and previous exam results and all that sort of thing. And Edinburgh had a big tradition of not producing scientists, but producing practitioners. And that was our proud tradition in Edinburgh. So I went there, 64. I was there from 64 to 70. Should have been 5 years, took me 6. Mainly because I did so many other things at the same time, going to sport, playing sport, involved in the Baptist Students Group, both locally and nationally. Every Friday night we went down the Union and had debates. It was a great, exciting time, the 60s, wasn't it? I thought it was. I thought it was brilliant. And David Steele had just not long left Edinburgh University and won the by-election in Roxburgh, Selkirk and Peebles. We had Robin Cook led the Labour group. What's his name? His name's gone from me again. He was Conservative Foreign Minister. Anyway, he led the Conservative group, and there was all sorts of things. You also had all these politicians come in every Friday night. You could pit your wits against them. We were useless, but it was great fun. It was great fun. So doing all that, of course, I had no time to study, and it was a full-time course, 9 to 5 every day of the week. So I took an extra year, but I graduated eventually in 1970. I then went to a practice in Lancaster, which we had a surgery in Lancaster, one in Morecambe. Was there for 3 years as an assistant. 73, moved back to Scotland, to Haddington, which is just down the A1 from Edinburgh, and was there for 4 years, the last 3 years in the partnership there, before going off to theological college. You've got to remember, this is the 70s I'm talking about now, 70 to 77. This is the James Herriot era, and some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight, you wouldn't get away with today, okay? It was great days. It was great fun. One of my partners, several years ago now, he retired at 55. The only time I've ever in my life been really jealous. And when he rang, when I got a Christmas, then said he's retired, and we're going to spend half the year in Australia, where their daughter was, some in the winter in Australia, 6 months, then we're going to come home here for 6 months. That's when I was jealous, okay? But I was talking to him one day, and he said, you wouldn't like it anymore. All the stuff we did has gone. It's more preventative stuff on the big herds and that, and the farming side, and that was the real fun side. So what I'm going to do is going to go through this title, All Creatures Great and Small. First, I want to try and prove to you that I was a vet, okay? I looked for my certificate. I couldn't find my certificate. I was going to do a copy of that. This is a picture. It's in a book. You can see the book, and that will prove even more so. And I've got a larger piece of it. The second person on the left there, it's a carving at a farm near North Berwick. This book, somebody said to my mother-in-law, your son-in-law was a vet, wasn't he? And he said, yes. This guy was into Scottish history. He said, my son gave me a history book this Christmas, and I think he's in there, and lo and behold, I am. I think every other picture is from the 19th century. But I am part of Scottish history, so if you want to look at that, and it actually says, Mr. Chawner, the Haddington vet. So I'm there, I can prove that I was a vet. It's there, and it's a carving that we were doing. If you look at it closely, and you can come and look at the pictures afterwards. In fact, I'll pass this one round. Try not to get your curry all over it, because it's the only copy I've got. But if you look carefully, you'll see the two guys that are helping are both smoking. You'll see it's muck and gore all over the place. That was the sort of conditions we worked in. And you know, we hardly ever got any infections, which I've done many a Caesar in that sort of situation on cattle, and hardly any infections. So let's start. And which was the one I hit next? Is that the one? Yes. Let's start with cattle, or coos, as they're known in Scotland. Fascinating, the language that you get. And yeah, funny beast cattle. What do you know about cattle? Anybody? Yeah. Sorry? Make good courage. Yeah. I've looked at many a good, in the Haddington area, it was mainly what they call barley beef. It was a big arable area, so they grew a lot of crops. But what was left over, they fed beef on, and these things, and they forced it. They kind of force-fed them. And by the time they were 7, 8 months, they were really nice-looking things. And you look at these things and think, that's a lovely steak, you know. I know that may sound cruel to all animal lovers, but that's the way I look. What my father used to call, when he looked at sheep, lamb chops on the hoof. Yeah, cattle. I always thank God, really, that cattle were so easy to handle, on the whole. I'll come in a minute to those that aren't. But on the whole, relatively easy to handle. If they knew their own weight and size, I'm sure they'd be a lot more difficult. But once you've got them by the nose, usually, and you get them around the ear and on the nose, you could calm most of them down, and particularly dairy cattle, because they're used to being handled all the time. But generally, dairy bulls were reckoned, because there's dairy cattle and beef cattle. There's two big categories. But the dairy bulls were the ones that you had to watch out for. The reason I've put this picture up there is because these are obviously Highland cattle. And we had a client, Lady Fairer, F-A-Y-R-E-R, spelt of Overhales. Now, Lady Fairer was very involved in the Scottish Nationalist Party. I was constituency chairman of the then Liberal Party, so we knew each other through that. And she called me out one day. I got a student with me, and she got a cow rather, that was down. Now, her farm was bang next to the A1, just north of Dunbar. So it was on the main road up into Scotland. It was the first herd of Highland cows you saw when you came up the A1 into Scotland, okay? So it was a tourist site. And it was on this sloping field right next to the A1. So we went out, and she said one of her cows was down. In other words, couldn't get up. And so we walked over, up the field, looked at it. The student was with me, she was with me. And I decided can't even remember what was wrong with it now, but I decided we'd give it so and so and so and so. So we walked back down, out the field, and getting the stuff out the car, chatting away to her for quite a while, not bothering about the cow really, but having a nice chat about politics. And she said, "Do you need a hand?" I said, "No, there's two of us. It's out down, it's not going to move, we'll be fine." So we walked up. And at this point, a busload stopped to watch these Highland cattle. And we walked up to this cow, and we're just getting up to it, and it starts to get up. So we've got choices now. We've got to try and stop it, okay? And remember, we're on a slope, okay? And the bus is there, and everybody's watching us. And I said to the student, "Get hold of the head," and he did. He got the head. It wasn't that big a beast, but it had got some momentum to go down the hill. So it gets up, and I've grabbed the tail, because if one of you's on the head and one's on the tail, you can kind of slow it down. I've got a syringe in this hand, and I'm going to inject it, at least if we can get it done and out of the way. So there's still people watching us. But at that point, the bull, who was also in the field, got interested, okay? His ears pricked up, and his horns, and, his interest got really intense, and he saw us gradually going down the slope of this field, desperately trying to hold onto this thing, and he starts to come in behind us. So we've now got a choice. We've got to get this thing injected. We've got to get out this field before this bull gets to us. And there we are, with all these 50-odd people watching us, herring down this hill. I told you it was James Herriot stuff, didn't I? We just managed to get an injection in, then as quick as we could, right down the field, over the fence, just as the bull got towards us. So you've got to just be a bit careful with some of them. Probably one of the most scary things I ever saw with cattle was when I was a student. We did what they called see in practice, where we had to, it was part of the course. You spent summers in veterinary practices. And I was out at, you come from Nottingham, you call it Southwell. If you live there, you call it Southwell. I don't know whether any of you know it, Southwell Minster and that. And with a vet there. And one day there'd been a massive, massive thunderstorm. We don't seem to get the same massive thunderstorms these days. I don't know why, but we did then. And we were called out to see these cattle, and I think it was, I need to look back. I did write a paper on it. I think it was about 8 cows and a bull had sheltered under a tree. And this tree had been hit by lightning. And it was the most amazing sight. These were just dead, flat out. But there were the knots in the tree had been blown out like corks. They were just scattered all over the place. And the birds that had been in the tree had just gone thunk, straight down. Bit scary, see what it could do. That same evening, we were called out to a guy who was doing some milking, and one of his cows had got something wrong with it. But when we got there, the thunderstorm had started again. The problem was this guy milked his cows in a shed, and it was little more than a shed, on a hill, in a field, at the top of a hill. So we got there with the lightning flashing all around us, having seen this earlier in the day. And we get up there, of course, it's all electric milking machines. He's got all that. The lights are flashing on and off. The lightning's coming down around us. And he's gaelish, milking these cows as if nothing's going wrong at all. We couldn't wait to get out of there. Again, we weren't interested in the cow, really. It was get out as quick as you can before we get hit. Interesting things, cows. Interesting thing about a cow is the best place to stand if you don't want to get kicked is immediately behind it. Because cows kick that way. Horses kick straight. Cows kick round. So if you stand back from them, you're more likely to get a mighty clout. The advantage is all they do is kick. That's the only dangerous bit. The important thing working with animals is to learn the dangerous bits first, okay? That's the important thing. So cows, I quite like cows. Like the easiest way to keep cows together, you know that if they're in a field, if you want to keep cows together, sit down. Because they're incredibly curious creatures. They will come over to you. Try it sometime. Just stand at a fence and see the cows come towards you. They're very curious. But be careful if there's a bull in the field. I don't recommend that necessarily. I could go on about castrating cows, but that's another matter. That's another story for another day. The next one, where are we? Does that work? No, it's the next one down there. Sheep may safely graze. I feel sorry for sheep. I've always felt sorry for sheep. Is it? Oh, it's gone on to horses. I couldn't tell the difference. Where are we? No. What's that doing? Let me go back. Should go back another one. There we are. Yeah, yeah, we'll have fun Sunday morning. Sheep. Not a lot to say about sheep. They are very docile, but I feel sorry for them because it's the only animal, when you start to think of it, that nobody doesn't eat, except vegetarians, of course. Every religion eats sheep, don't they? Lamb. You know, if you're a cow, you could, emigrate to a Hindu country and you're all right. If you're a pig, go to a Jewish or a Muslim country and you're all right. The poor old sheep, wherever it goes in the world, it gets it in the neck, literally. Literally. But they're lovely little creatures, really. The first time, I hadn't been working long in Lancaster, and the boss had been out to a lambing. Of course, this is lambing season now. And I was going in to do the surgery, and he said, I've been to a lambing. It needs a Caesar. I'm sending it in. Can you do it after you've done the surgery? I'd never done a cesarean section on a sheep before. Not a clue. Nobody had taught me at college how to anesthetize a sheep. I said, well, what do I do? He said, it's dead easy. You just pick it up, lie it on its side on the table, clean up the area you're going to cut into, the wound. Pull the wool out, because you can pull wool out, clean it up, and then just put some local anesthetic in, it'll be fine. And it was. Never flinched. Once you got a local anesthetic in, you could cut through the skin. And we did it there, and then actually it was downstairs in the yard where we kept the cars and everything. And fascinating. And the idea that sheep are very submissive, like a lamb to the slaughter, is actually true. They're incredibly tame and mild, as it were. Although once, when I was a theological student working with a church in Edinburgh on a big council estate, big tough council estate, high rise and everything, and they took the kids away for a summer camp, and we went up into the area where I worked actually, and stayed in a school, the kids did, and there was this girl there who locally in the area was the toughie. Everybody was terrified of her. She was the hard nut, Everybody ran him. She said you do something, you did it. She said jump, you said how high, and all that. All the other kids hated her. Well, not hated her, but were terrified of her. We got out there, and next to the school where they were staying was a field of sheep. She was absolutely terrified of these sheep. She wouldn't go anywhere near them. This tough girl that nobody would go anywhere near because, she was so tough, was terrified. I never worked that one out, really. Nobody had told her that sheep are safe. And they are safe. They don't bite. They don't kick. I can't think of anything why I should not like a sheep, really. And lamb is excellent, isn't it? So let's go on to horses, if this works. Some ponies there. Now, they're different. It's the most dangerous animal of all, a horse. One, if you fall off it. Actually, equestrian sport is the most dangerous sport. Did you know that? Because if you fall off a horse going at 30, 40 mile an hour and hit the ground, it's very difficult. Now, we've got a full-time guy in horse racing, and some of the stuff that happens is quite scary. Anyway, I never did take to horses. Nothing wrong with them. They're lovely beasts. The only trouble is they both bite and kick. So you're never sure which end to run away from, You've got to be very careful. And they're incredibly sensitive as well when you're handling them. If you want to anesthetize them, in a place like Newmarket, they have special places, foamed and everything, where they go down. We didn't know that sort of thing. So you could injure a horse just by anesthetizing it from the way it fell. And confession time, I once was involved in that, and the poor guy who was on the head of the horse, when it went down, didn't move properly, and we finished up with him with a fractured hip, and me with the horse on the ground anesthetized, and it was all a mess on a Sunday afternoon. But that's another story altogether. The problem with horses isn't the animals, it's the people that own them. Anybody here own a horse? No, you're not going to Cheltenham then. They're lovely animals, really. But the people that own them, the pony club crowd and all that, think they know so much more than you do because they are who they are. And the practices, the barbaric practices for horses, we used to twitch horses if you wanted to do anything with them to calm them down. And what it was, you took, because they've got this great big fleshy upper lip, and you got a pole with just a noose on the end of it, just a rope noose, and you get the upper lip and put this on, then you'd twist it so that you really twisted it hard. If they started to be a bit awkward, then you'd twist it more, so that the more pain you gave them, the less they did. And I don't know whether I dare say it. I will say it, because you'll appreciate this or you'll hate it, okay? But I was once talking to a vet who'd started out with the old vets when they used to castrate horses standing up, okay? And the vet would get underneath the horse to castrate it, standing up, right? You start to think, what's happening here? And this young vet said to him, weren't you ever afraid of being kicked? And he said, no, it was dead easy. If you felt them tensing to kick, you just grabbed hold and you pulled like mad. And they never kicked you. I told you it was James Herriot stuff. But you can see the logic of that, can't you? It's perfectly logical. The poor old thing went like that. And that was the end of it. But yeah, there were some barbaric practices. Some we didn't do. A lot of horse people wanted you to fire and blister them. You'd say to them, if it's got strains in the soft tissue, in the tendons and stuff, the answer is rest it. Rest it for 3 months. Oh, no, we're not going to. And they wouldn't. And once they saw it was walking and looked like it was walking normally, then they'd ride it again. Of course, that will put extra pressure on it, so you'd damage the soft tissue again. But they said, no, what it needs is blistering and firing. And you literally would. A local anesthetic down the back of the leg, you had a firing iron which just burnt into the flesh. Then you rub this stuff in. We never did it because we refused to do it. Rub this stuff in, which caused a blister. And of course, what happened is the horse limped on that leg for 3 months. Did exactly the same, except it was as resting it for 3 months. But it was barbaric, really. But horse people seem to like that. But they've improved, I'm sure. Don't get me wrong. Let's move on to, how about these creatures? You like these? Pigs. They're actually quite nice creatures. Creatures of habit, good habit. They'll always mess in the same place, eat in the same place. They're known as dirty and everything else. They love groveling around. The thing I got against them was they smell. And it's not so much that they smell, but when you touch pigs, there was a guy at college with me, he couldn't wait to get out of college to go and work over in East Anglia in pig practices. And I couldn't understand that, because you couldn't get the smell off your hands. No matter how much you cleaned your hands, you had that smell of pigs, the kind of musty smell, which I never enjoyed. And you get in the car, mind you, the car was always filthy because you were in and out of it. You wore great thigh-length boots so you could kneel down in the muck and everything. And you were in and out of the car. You never got them properly clean. So the car was always a mess. It was criminal what we did to cars, really. But the pigs can be, the one time you need to be very careful, well, boars can be a bit touchy, and in can be a lot touchy, but it's sows when they've just had piglets. A friend of mine finished up with 27 stitches up his arm because he bent down to this sow, and she just went whoom, and got the tusk in and ripped up his arm. So you just had to be a bit careful. When I was in Lancaster Moor Hospital, which was the mental hospital, had a piggery. It was to keep, because it was those days when before care in the community, when these places, institutions were full, and they gave the guys something to do. And we used to go up and inoculate the piglets not long after they'd been born, vaccinate them. So, but you had to separate the sow from the piglets. Now, that was not an easy thing to do, because she was very defensive of these things. And you knew she was, she could knock you over, she could do you damage. But these guys up at the mental hospital, bless them, they didn't quite grasp the danger of what was happening. And they would go around and they'd just kick the poor old sow, to get it to move along. And this thing, you think, oh, something desperate's going to happen here. But there was a problem up there with a pig one day, and the boss was going on holiday. He'd been seeing it. And he said to me, will you go up and see this? So I did. When I got up there, we got into the pen, and the thing came towards us. It was a boar, actually. And both myself and the pig keeper were straight over the fence, well, the wall out of there. So we got a rope on it and got it tied up so that we could get in and handle it. When the boss came back, he said, how did you get on? And I explained what had happened. Oh, no, he said, no, it's no problem with that. No problem at all. You shouldn't have had that problem. In other words, I was the young upstart, and he knew what he was doing. So he went up to see it again, said nothing. Next time I was up, I said to the pig keeper, or the guy in charge of the pigs, what happened when he came up. He said, oh, he never went inside the pen, he said. He was claiming to me he went in there and did all these things with it and everything else. When I found out what, I was vindicated at least. But pigs, quite like pigs. I do like pork as well, to be honest. Let's move on to dogs. This is a very quick flick through. Beautiful dog, that, isn't it? Dalmatian. Tell you a story. There's a reason for having a Dalmatian up there. Quite like working with dogs. People used to say, if you're a vet, you must love animals. I don't love animals. You can't love an animal. You can love another person, but you can't love an animal. You can like them a lot. You can find them as great companions. You can have a kind of friendship and a relationship with them. But love, I think, is a word we need to reserve for human relationships. But I did enjoy working with animals, and that was the key thing you've got to enjoy. Dogs. The one thing I discovered about dogs, and you may not know this, so this is a revelation to you, they have a predilection for eating vet's bills. The number of times we go to people and say, you've not paid your bill. Oh, didn't come. Well, we sent it. Oh, the dog must have ate it. Amazing, isn't it? How they knew that was the one thing that they were meant to eat when it came through the door in the morning. Yeah. They bite, of course, but some of them, I used to love bull terriers because you get them, they could have a leg almost hanging off. And you could examine them, and most of them wouldn't budge an inch. They'd almost defy you to hurt me. The real hard case, hard nuts. You can't hurt me. They just look at you. You can't hurt me. That was wonderful. They're real tough. Now, of course, they're bred to be tough. But some do bite. The worst bite I ever got was a poor dog, it was a big dog as well, who got bone cancer. And bone cancer is a very, very painful thing. And I was going to see it, and I just bent down. I was going to stroke its head. But the dog, it's my fault, the dog immediately thought I was going to touch it was in its foreleg. I was going to touch it, and of course it reacted and got me caught right in the back of its mouth, in its molars, and started to grind away on me. It didn't do any damage, thankfully, except it hurt. It hurt significantly. There was one day, we also had a phone, obviously you're on call, had a phone by the bed. The phone rang, I don't know what time in the morning, it was about 6 o'clock in the morning, before I would normally get up. We didn't start surgery till 9. Rang at 6, and there was these folk rang. And their Alsatian was having fits. It had epileptic fits. It was having a fit. They knew what to do. And I thought, I was half asleep. You know when that half asleep thing, you're not thinking. And I said, well, just clear the space around it, and I'll come along first thing in the morning and see what's happening. Put the phone down, went back to sleep. An hour or so later, I woke up and I said to Liz, did that phone ring? She said, yeah. And I have vague recollection of these people ring. I'd never written down who they were or where they were. You know what it's like. So now I'm thinking, I've promised to go there, but, I've made a complete Orlix of this one to start off with. Anyway, not long after that, the phone rang, and it was the same people. Praise the Lord. They've, got in contact. The dog's dead. Oh, that's the bad news now. Good news first, bad news. So they weren't upset with me or anything like that at all. They were very pleasant. So I said, okay, I'll come along. I'm down your way this morning. I'll come along and pick up the body, because we would take the bodies, and it was actually the local knackers yard that took them and disposed of them. So I went down, and that morning I was picking up a new car. We drove Volkswagen Beetles. Great cars, except when you're going up and down farm tracks, because the exhaust is so low, it rusts in no time at all. So in no time at all, it sounded like a diesel. If you're going at 2 o'clock in the morning through these villages around Lancashire, you're going all through the middle of the town, or village rather. Anyway, I was getting a new one that morning. So I was on my way to get the new car, right? And I called into where they were and went in. Well, I got there, and they were very grateful that I'd gone. Oh, it's so good of you to come. And I'm thinking, no, it's not. I've messed this one up, so I'm feeling all guilty and everything else. And get in. This is an easy job. I'm just going to take this thing away, It was massive. I mean, it was massive. And we used bags to put the bodies in, but this one wouldn't go into one bag. It needed 2. What's more, by this time, it was stiff, okay? So it's got, it's like that. So we have great difficulty trying to bend it a bit and get one bag at one end and one bag down the other. And then we've got to get it out to the car. Well, of course, Volkswagen Beetle, the boot was at the front, the proper Beetles, and that's full of drugs and all my stuff, so there's no room in there. So it's got to go in the car. But this thing's massive. So I'm trying to think how to get in the car. So, but anyway, I'll pull up because they've got a paved bit with a garden bit in the middle. And I said, I was parked on the road. I said, I'll bring the car in, make it easier for us to get it into the car. Gets in the car, back straight into a tree. I got out the car. I said, don't worry, I'm getting a new one. By this time, they're convinced I'm a total idiot, okay? And then I pulled it into the drive. We get the dog out, and the only way we could do it was over the front seat, so it's actually kind of like that in these two bags over the front seat. Literally, this is true. And then I'm just wanting to get out. You know, by now, I couldn't get out of there quick enough, covered in embarrassment and confusion. And then as I'm going out, they said, well, we are so grateful. I wasn't going to, they said, what, I'm not going to charge him for that, obviously not, because it's my fault in the first place. Not my fault it's died, but I could have done it better. And they gave me, I think it was £10, which was a lot of money in the 70s. They said, no, please take this, because we're so grateful for all you've done. Take the money, get in the car, drive away. And then I found, pulling up, I'd gone into their flower beds. And the car wouldn't move. We had to push it out. Dogs can be a problem, okay? And that dog got its own back on us because we used to leave them downstairs till the knacker came and picked them up. This thing stank. Absolutely stank. It really got its revenge on me, I tell you. I tell you another thing about dogs. Anybody here had a dog that wipes its bottom along the ground, just scoots along? Usually impacted or infected anal glands. And the technique is to just two little glands either side of the anus there, which actually they use, probably never smelt a dog's backside. I've not really, not deliberately anyway. It's what they use to mark their territory and all that sort of thing. If they get impacted, they're very sore and can get infected. So you just hold it either side and just squeeze them and squeeze this stuff out. Sometimes it was solid and sometimes it was liquid, okay? It's normally liquid. So you'd have a bit of cotton wool or something. And the trouble is, when you start squeezing, you've no control over where it goes. I'll leave you to think what can happen with it. It was always fun. It was always fun. But this dog here, a Dalmatian, I was doing the surgery one day in Lancaster. It was one afternoon, and you came up the stairs. The waiting room was downstairs. They came up the stairs onto the surgery bit. And this lady came up. I guess she was probably in her 50s. Very elegant lady, quite attractive, beautifully dressed, with this gorgeous Dalmatian, absolutely beautiful dog. And she came up and said, yes, what can we do for you? She said, I want you to put this dog down. Which seemed odd, and at the end of the day, you would never refuse, because you never knew what the people were going to do. I've seen dogs dragged out by the RSPCA that had, bricks tied on their legs and just dumped in the river, and that's cruel. So at least we can do it in a kind way, in a safe way. So but you also made them squirm a bit and charged them a bit more if you didn't think it was justified. But you got the joke, yeah. I wish we did. So I thought, I'm not going to do it. What is the issue? Didn't put it in those ways, but why do you want the dog put down? She said, well, it's like this. It was my husband's dog, and he died, and we just had the funeral this morning, which explained why she was dressed up. She said, and I thought the dog would want to be with him. Literally true. It was on the tip of my tongue to say, well, what would have happened if the dog had died first? But no. Amazing, really. Amazing what people will say. Okay, let's go on to cats. I used to keep cats. I like cats. The only trouble is when they bite, it's like a hypodermic syringe, isn't it? It goes straight in and straight out. You don't notice it at first, and then, boy, is it sore afterwards and can get quite infected. Very independent. I don't really call them domesticated animals. Kept them, love them, but they're very imperious. You understand why the Egyptians worship them. At least they stay where you feed them. If you want to keep a cat, just feed it. It likes its stomach. That's what it loves most of all. We had one cat called Twinkle. It wasn't the name I gave it, okay? It was a long story while we finished up with this cat, but a friend had named it, and her husband wouldn't let her keep the cat, so we took it. Lovely cat, Twinkle, till I ran over it. And it had this stupid habit of dozing underneath the rear tire of the car. Volkswagen Beetle again. And I didn't stop. I used to come out usually with about 5 minutes to get to the surgery, because that's what you do, you know. Get in the car, I'd put it in gear, I'd start it, and I'd move in one go, you know. Bang, 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 you were off. And I knew the cat had this habit of being under the rear wheel. This morning I got out in a hurry, bang, 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 boom, bump. I've killed the cat, you know. And then thankfully I saw it disappearing down the side of the garage. So got to work, nothing I could do, it was going to run off. Got to work and I rang Liz and said, the cat's gone to run away, but it will come back, and when it comes back, I think it will be limping. And it was, because I'd broken its leg. So I took it in. It wasn't me that did it, one of the other guys in the practice. I didn't pin it, he put it in a plaster and that. Brought it home that night. I thought I'd be very kind to this cat. In the cat box, in front of the fire, leave the fire on, keep it warm all night, because it's been through a traumatic experience. Went to bed and we couldn't sleep, because this stupid thing got out of there, and all we heard was bump, bump. And every time he tried to walk, the weight of this plaster unbalanced it and just went over and bang and over him. So I had to put it in the cat box and just seal it up so it didn't do that and do more damage. But it actually finished up climbing trees with that plaster on, a great plaster on its back leg. And it could still climb trees without any problem. They're amazing creatures, I think, cats. There's a woman at church when we were in Lancaster who used to keep everybody, well, she took in any stray cats, drove me mad on a Sunday because she couldn't wait to get hold of me and ask me what was wrong with this one. She kept them all, but she wasn't prepared to pay to have them treated, sort of thing. So she said to me one day, she said, this cat, she's talking about this cat was ill and everything, what was wrong? I said, I'd probably be dead by Friday. And it was. She thought I was wonderful. She thought, it's amazing how you can please people, really. So that's cats. Let's keep moving, because we don't want to keep you all night, although I could do. What are we on to next? Come on. Hit the thing. Yeah. What I've generally titled exotics. That's anything, really. I would include birds in this. Birds are budgies. Clipping budgies' claws. What a job. The problem with a budgie is if you hold it too tight, you kill it. They're only little things, you know. And yet this thing didn't want you to clip its claws, so you're struggling with it. I was doing this 2 old ladies. I'll never forget. I think I was down Morecambe. I was doing this. And this thing, I was trying not to hold it too tight, and it was wriggling around trying to clip its claws without causing them to bleed and everything. And all of a sudden, it flies away. And stupidly, what did I do? I reached after it, and I pulled off its tail feathers. I don't know what I told them, but they believed me. That was the important thing. Once had a woman with an African grey parrot. We used to do a branch surgery down in North Berwick when I was in Haddington. And actually, interestingly enough, last year I discovered I was still a trustee of the build of the property that surgery was in. All the rest of my partners had died. But through a historical quirk, nobody had taken us off being trustees, so they needed my permission before they could sell it. That's another matter. And this woman had got this African grey parrot, and it got all problems with its plumage. Absolute pain. I knew nothing about African grey parrots. I knew nothing about birds, you know, really. So we could refer them to Edinburgh Zoo, and we did that sort of thing. But this thing was persistent. Whatever we did, it still was losing feathers and that. So you pull out the ultimate one, you know, how old is it? You know what's coming next, don't you? How old is she? 12. Well, it's getting old, I said. You know, it's probably age that's doing it. She looked at me and she said, they live to 30. It was a bit embarrassing that moment, you know. She thought I should have known that. How would I know how long an African grey parrot lives for? Yeah, we had everything. Goldfish, gerbils. These are the sort of things, and I tell you, it's James Herriot time, that we would specialise in. In other words, the first person to see a goldfish, which was one of my partners, this prize goldfish was worth a lot of money, got a growth on it. And he went to great lengths. This guy wanted to keep this goldfish and get it operated on. You can anaesthetize them, take them out of the water and operate on them. Brilliant stuff. But then anybody came with a fish, you need to see Mr. Bell, he's the expert. I got gerbils. I only got gerbils because my son was going to nursery, and we got the gerbils to look after. But then one day, the 2 male gerbils they thought they got discovered they weren't 2 male gerbils. At least the gerbils knew that well enough, and there was a lot of little gerbils. And they wanted me to sex them. Don't ever try and say, you can't, you know, it's all very technical stuff, but it's almost impossible to sex baby gerbils. So from then on, because I'd sexed these gerbils, probably incorrectly, but who knew anyway, I got all the gerbils that came in. And you'd refer people over like that because you didn't want to see these things, you know. And then the reason I've got Fred up there, anybody know what that is? It's not an alligator, it's not a crocodile, sorry? It's a caiman, yeah. We did, when I was in Lancaster, we had the contract for SeaWorld. Was it SeaWorld? I think, anyway, whatever it was called, on Morecambe Pier. The boss did the dolphins. The reason the boss did all the dolphin work was because the council sent him on conferences all over the world about dolphins. That was the only reason he did the dolphin work. He wasn't really interested in dolphins, you know, which get pig diseases, funnily enough. Weird thing. But one day the boss said to me, they've got problems with the caimans down in, on the pier. You're down that way. Can you go and do it? The one's died. Can you go and do a post-mortem? And he said, I've got a butcher's knife in the back of the car. You'll need that. So I went out. I'll never forget. It was a Friday afternoon. All I wanted to do was get home. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was winter. The night was, you know, it was getting dull. It was slinging it down with rain. And there am I, exposed on the back of Morecambe Pier, because they just dumped it outside, doing a post-mortem on this stupid caiman thing, not knowing at all what the inside of a caiman looks like, I have to say. Never having seen one before, so I sliced it open. It took ages to get through the skin and everything, because you know, it's that thick. And I found something in the gut which I thought was, you know, vaguely looked odd. So right, I'll pass all that up. We sent them off to a guy called David Taylor, who had he was in Manchester, set himself up as the zoo vet. We didn't know whether he knew any more than us, but at least it was somebody to refer it to. It was also a bit of a difficulty sending stuff through the post. We used to send stuff sometimes for analysis to Liverpool, to the government laboratories there. Boss sent a whole lot of stuff one, I think it's a hilarious story, one summer, and there was a delay in the post, and he hadn't said what was in these samples, and they were all pieces of gut, and it was a scorching hot time. Whole thing exploded in the post office. Anyway, David Taylor came back to me on the phone, and he said, right, I've found something. I think you've got this. I'm good now. You know, I'm good with caimans now. I'm an expert. He said, what you need to do is treat them with this. I said, how do we get that into them? He said, you stomach tube them. I'm thinking, we're never going to stomach tube. And there was quite a few of them, you know. We're never going to do. So I went down to the guys at SeaWorld and said, look, he said we should stomach tube them, and they had the same reaction. You know, we ain't going anywhere near these things. So they said, how about we just roll the powder in some food and throw it into them, which they did, and none of the rest of them died. So whether it was because of what we did or in spite of what we did, I don't know. But the thought of trying to stomach tube one of these hideous things was not something I looked forward to. Let's move on, because I want to talk about one of the strangest creatures of all. Not combine harvesters, but farmers. Stranger than anything else God's ever created, farmers. They have their own language. It took me ages to work out. I knew we had a word, they had it in Lancashire, at least the area I was in, for mastitis, which is mastitis in cows, in the udder, inflammation in the udder. They called it gargut. They kept their cattle in shippons, not in barns. They kept them in shippons. When I went to Scotland, they kept their cattle in byres. You had to get used to the language that they used. But they're really funny. In 1976, everyone remembers 1976, that scorching hot summer. And England were blackwashed, weren't they? Tony Gregg saying we'll make them grovel, and then West Indies walked all over us. We had a scorching hot summer. And East Lothian, where I worked, Haddington, was a big potato growing area. We had good weather, but it was not scorching hot. Never is in Scotland, is it? And we had a deal of rain and everything. Down in England, nothing was growing. And the potato guys cashed in on this, because our crops, you could put anything in the ground in East Lothian, it would grow. It's that sort of fertile area. And before that, the summer happened, potatoes, for a half sack, it was 70p. I'll never forget it. And half sack, £28. You'd often go on a farm. They say, do you want a half bag of potatoes? Yep. Bung it in the back of the car. That was fine. That was their little gift to you, and you did things for them, like give them worming pills for the dogs, looked at the dogs. We didn't charge them for that sort of thing, you know. So it was a tit for tat. 76 came, and the price of potatoes rose overnight 3 times. It went up from 70p a half bag to £2, 10p a half bag. Do you know, we never saw a half bag of potatoes after that. And the amazing thing was, they got so much money now, you know, but all they could see was what they were giving away, not its comparison. The next year, 1977, they had new combines, they had new cars, they had new tractors, anything to hide this money from the taxman, because they'd been cashing in. They got such good crops. They also were quite funny in their behavior. We had one, I can say his name, Spud Thompson. He was called Spud because he'd been a motorbike rider, a speedway rider in his younger days. Spud, he was not in his younger days when I knew him. He was well into his 60s. He was as round as he was tall. But Spud, and this is the 70s, and this is what it was like, and you know that. When he came to the office, if we went there, he'd chase the girls around there was 2 girls who worked in the office. 3, I think. We had 2 nurses and one as admin. They'd chase them around the desk. No chance of catching them, you know, because so we didn't worry too much about that. But Spud, if he took dislike to you, he took to dislike to you. And I went one day, and he was terrible to his men. He'd been really nasty to his men. And he reared beef. And they fed them on chopped turnips because they grew a lot of turnips. So they chopped the turnips up. And sometimes these were too big. The cattle swallowed them. They get stuck in the esophagus, and they bloat. They couldn't let the gas out. So the stomachs would bloat. And this one was bloated. And I went along. And when I got there, I realized there was a problem. The head cattleman, who I knew well, an older guy, he's in his 50s, he'd tried to clear this, and he damaged it. It was obvious just looking at it and messing about. And I got a gag. You put a gag in the mouth, keep the mouth open. It's a metal thing that just keeps the mouth open. And was fiddling about, and Spud came round the corner. He immediately thought I'd done this. And I thought, well, I'm not going to say otherwise, because this cattleman, he'll never hear the last of it. He'll be on to him all the time, so I can take the blame for this. That's fine. And he knew that. And so I took the blame for it, and Spud wouldn't speak to me. Didn't want me on the farm, all that sort of thing, because I was useless. And anyway, one day they had a cow that was down. It was lunchtime before they found it, and it was right next to the farm. They should have seen this earlier. It was staggers, a magnesium deficiency. And it was out. I picked it up as anybody could go, because it was desperate. You know, they realized they should have seen this earlier, and he knew he should have seen it earlier. And I went and I treated it, and I said, right, I'll come back after lunch and see how it's getting on. And it got better. And after that, he was as nice as anything to me. You know, it was just the little things. There was one vet who you'd ring, and if Lilius answered, they'd say, don't send the English vet. That was the sort of thing you had to put up with. Let's skip through. Yeah, I could talk a lot about. Yeah, there was one farmer, Christmas Day I went out, just a case of mastitis. It could have waited 2-3 days. He got stuff to treat it. Insisted on me going out 11 o'clock Christmas morning, and he never even wished me Merry Christmas. I thought, you miserable. He got charged a bit extra. Yeah, I could tell you a lot about charging. Let's just talk briefly about owners. Funny things. Well, there's the story of the Dalmatian. The number of people who bring a dog in and say, he'll get all upset when I leave because he'll really miss me, you know, leaving them for operations. As soon as they walked out, the dog was as quiet as anything. It's just amazing, you know. What amazed me about owners is if they put faith and trust in you, the thing will get better, 9 times out of 10. If they didn't, no matter how simple it was, if they thought you weren't going to be able to do it, quite often it wouldn't work. And it was an amazing thing how that faith and that trust that they put in you as a vet had an almost reflected thing onto the family. In Haddington, we had a lot of big estate farms, and Duke of Hamilton was one of them. You remember the Duke of Hamilton? Those who remember the war story, that's where Hess landed, wasn't it? The place he went to when Hitler sent him over to try and negotiate peace. Anyway, out at their place, I went out one day. The Douglas Hamiltons, he was another one that was involved in Tory politics. But one of the younger brothers was a musician. And the problem with one of the dogs, it was a Saturday, I'll never forget it, went into the music room, you know, this big room, music room. And the dog was a bit sort of snappy, so we wanted to muzzle it, and I was going to get some tape, which you do, just make a muzzle. A friend of mine did that once with a dog and put it on the table. He went to muzzle it. She said, what are you going to do? Because it was snappy. He said, I'm going to muzzle it. She said, it's only because he's afraid. And my friend said, he's not half as afraid as I am. The woman picked up the dog and walked out. Anyway, I was going to get, so he said, no, he takes off. Douglas Hamilton, yeah, takes off his pure silk tie, and he wraps it around the muzzle. This slavering dog, it was a big thing. It was all over his pure silk. I thought, that's class, that is. That's real class, when you can use your silk tie in that sort of circumstance. I once went to Lord Haddington's place, dropping names here and there, and the dog, I've been seeing the dog, and they'd left it downstairs in the servants' quarters for me to see, because I wasn't allowed upstairs there. And I was on my own. The dog was in there in the room. There was a message. I'd been told where it would be. And there was a message just left on the back of a piece of card saying what had happened, how the dog was and everything. So I picked up this piece of card, looked at it. On the other side was the invitation to Lord Lichfield's wedding. I thought, that's class as well, when you scribble a note to the vet on the back of that. So I took it home, put it on the mantelpiece. Nobody bit, really. Anyway, vets, they're strange creatures as well. I was going through that. Yeah, let me bring it to a conclusion. All sorts of stories. Let me tell you one, though. Go back to cattle. I was going home, it was in Lancaster. It was my last call before lunch, and I was running late. And I got surgery to do at 2. I wanted to grab in and get something to eat, because if you did the evening surgery as well, it might be 8, half past by the time you got home. So it was a question of going in and getting something to eat. And it was cleansing a cow. And cleansing a cow is when the part of the, what's the flipping thing called the baby's wrapped in? I've gone and lost it now. The placenta is still in there. And of course it goes rotten and it can get infected. So they leave it for a few days and hopefully it'll come out. If not, you can take it out manually as best as you can. Put some antibiotic pessary in, give her a shot of antibiotics, and 99% of the time that's all it needs. So I've been called to cleanse this cow, and I get there and it was loose. I said to the guy, is it okay? You know, is she quite calm? And he said, yeah, and there were some pig pens there. I said, well, let's run her in there. If she's not going to make a fuss, then we can just do it there. And of course, it was just slightly raised, so the cow goes in, it's slightly raised. I get my gown on, as in that carving thing, and the long gloves. You see some glistening in that picture, that's the plastic gloves. And I go in, of course, to cleanse the cow. Simple job, I'll get this done in 5 minutes, get home and get my lunch. What he hadn't told me, and was vital to this whole story, was that it had the scours, which means it had diarrhea. And I'm in there, and it happened. Okay? It happened, and I was literally in it. Absolutely covered in this stinking stuff. Had to finish the job off. It was in my hair. I think I was wearing contact lenses then. You know, all over my face, all down my stuff. I had to go home, have a bath. Even then, you couldn't get the smell off. You know, it was terrible. So we had some good fun. It was good fun, but it had its moments. It had its moments. I think, just to conclude, all creatures great and small, we call this. Well, you called this, Ivor. But that hymn says, the Lord God made them all. And I think several things I learned from being a vet. One was dealing with people. That's the greatest thing I learned, dealing with people, working with people. Teamwork, because it was everything. From the moment that phone rang and the girl took the message in the office, to where they passed, who they passed it out to, who was in this area, that area, how efficient we were. It was a big team effort. Same in the practice, teamwork together. But it was that the Lord God made them all, the diversity, the wonder, of creation and what we are. I remember talking to I'd been out to do a lambing up in the Quorma Hills. There were a lot of Methodist farmers up there. And this guy was talking about the wonder of birth. I remember saying to him, you know, the wonder to me is that it gets to that stage at all. There are so many things that can go wrong. You've got more chance of winning the lottery than you have of producing a whole, healthy fetus, you know, and young, whatever it is, calf, lamb, human being. There's so much can go wrong. It's quite amazing that it ever goes right. And yet it does, time and time and time again. You know, just the complexity of this thing, the body, human and animal body, the variety that God's created. We've been through some of them tonight, from birds to caiman to cattle to sheep to pigs. Isn't it wonderful, God's creation? And so often we take it for granted, don't we? We don't realize the wonder of it, the diversity of it. I think sometimes we should celebrate that more rather than just getting so focused on what we're doing and seeing everything and forgetting what's around us and the beauty of it. Yeah, sometimes they bite and sometimes they kick and sometimes, yeah, they're not so nice. But the amazing things are animals, the body, everything that moves and breathes, and it's all God's creation. All creatures, great and small. That was the thing as vets, we had to deal with them. You could not refuse to treat something, even if you knew nothing about it. They said you had to treat it. Even if it was just keeping it going until you found somebody who didn't know what they were doing, you were obliged to do that. The one thing we could do that doctors couldn't do, and it may have changed, the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons got it so tied up that we were able to treat humans in an emergency, but woe betide any doctor that touched an animal. We'd have had them for it, okay? We got it really tight. But no, that fact that God made every one of these in all its complexity, in all its diversity, and I think we should celebrate that more and more in all that he's done. Hope you've given you some stories. I told you it was a weird time, it was a fun time, and it was a different time. It's different now, but it was good. Yep. I learned from the animals, so I know how to work with people. It's a different flock.